in 1 second.
Sure.
Aloha and welcome to Earth Day Live from Hawaii. Today we have a very special guest. We're really excited to have him here. It's Dr. Kamanimaikalani Beamer, and he is an associate professor at the Center for Hawaiian Studies in the ʻāina Momona program at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, with a joint appointment in the Richardson School of Law and the Hawaii Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge. Previous to this role, Dr. Beamer was the president and chief executive officer of the Kohala Center. Beamer's research on governance, land tenure, and Hawaiian resource management, as well as his prior work as the director of Aina-based education at Kamehameha Schools, prepared him for his continuing service as a director of Stanford University's First Nations Futures Institute, a resource management development program for indigenous leaders developed by Stanford, Kamehameha Schools, and Te Ronanga o Kai Tahu, hope I got that right, in New Zealand. Beamer has revitalized and maintained Loi Kalo taro ponds, providing him and his children opportunities to malaima Aina, deepen connections with cultural traditions, and derive leadership lessons from the land. In 2013, he was nominated and confirmed to a 4-year appointment on Hawaii's State Commission on Water Resource Management and was reconfirmed in 2017 for an additional 4-year term. In addition to numerous academic publications, in 2014, Dr. Beamer published No Mako Kamana, Liberating the Nation, which received multiple awards, including the Samuel M. Kamakau Book of the Year Award from the Hawaii Book Publishing Association. Welcome, Dr. Beamer.
Hi, aloha. Thank you for having me. It's a good fun trial here to be streaming from home all over the world. So thank you.
So you have a presentation, I think, ready to go for us, and we're going to talk a little bit, and you're going to show a video, and we'd like to hear a little bit more. I mean, your intro, you're involved in so many areas, and the nature of this talk is Aloha Aina and the circular economy. So can you tell us a little bit about what that means? And we know Aloha, we know Aina, but how does that work in with the circular economy?
Sure. I prepared a few slides to kind of set the stage,
Okay.
and I'll kind of talk about the little bit about the origins of Aloha Aina. If you're here in Hawaii, and if you've paid attention, you probably have heard the phrase Aloha Aina. It's really this ancestral philosophy that expresses, familiar relationship between, Kanaka and the Aina. Um, from a Hawaiian indigenous perspective, we see the land as an ancestor, natural system. We're deified as a kua because they gave life, and um, and so I'm going to kind of frame a little bit of that, which is really this philosophy that kind of guided our ancestors' development of resources and relationships to the land. And then I'm going to kind of link it to some emerging work that I've been doing with some colleagues at the University of Augsburg in Germany on circular economies. And At least from my perspective, somewhat ironically, and I think incredibly hopeful for mitigating climate change and the crisis that we face, is these opportunities to bridge indigenous knowledge systems and reforming the ways that our future economies of the world will work, which is what is happening right now with the circular economy movement. So,
So
yes,
are you ready to dive in? I just have a quick question. So can you tell us a little bit about, the ancient Hawaiian system? What was the population in Hawaii, in the day pre-contact day? Of course, they didn't have barges coming in with food.
no, no,
And very, very self-sustaining people. So can you tell us a little bit of the populations or the estimated populations on the islands, you know,
Sure.
before contact?
Uh-huh, absolutely. And I'm gonna get into it a little bit in the slides, but so low estimates of the population pre-contact are probably about 600,000. And more recently, research that's been more thoroughly vetted. Natalie Kurashima, who's a recent Kanaka PhD, did some modeling and showed that our food systems produced enough calories to feed about roughly 1.3 million people. David Stannard has a landmark book called Before the Horror, where he estimated the pre-contact population to be at 800,000, upwards to about a million. So that's kind of the range, roughly between 600,000 and about 1.3 million, and David's kind of in the middle there with about 800,000. Um, and the importance of this is, you're right, entirely fed that large of a population with the resources, from our place. So with rope made from fiber in the forest and tools made out of stone, we fed more people back then than we do today with all our modern tools and technologies. Today, the population of Hawaii is about roughly 1.4 million people, with the vast majority of those people all on one island on Oahu. So we also can say for certain that, in earlier times, pre-contact, prior to Cook, every island other than Oahu was more greatly populated than it is today. Again, all fed from these resources and guided by this philosophy of Aloha Aina that I'm going to kind of go into and discuss. Any other
I
questions?
I've just got one other quick question that I wanted to set up here before we go into it, and maybe your presentation answers it. I don't know, but the economy pre-contact, was there a monetary? Was there money? Was it trade based? How were the resources, allocated and valued?
Sure, sure. Um, so I'm gonna say that the economy was a circular economy, in the sense that the resources that we utilized, there was nothing that was wasted. Everything was put back into production and utilized. It was not a market economy by any stretch. This is, prior to, the West sort of invention of capitalism. Um, but there was definitely sort of this makana or gift or trade exchange of resources and materials, um, not only between neighboring ahupua'a, and I'm going to talk more about these specific kind of indigenous land divisions, but also between islands themselves. And there were specific kinds of resources that could only be gathered in certain places. There's these ad stones, we call in Hawaiian, that are ko'i. And basically what these are, all of our islands here in Hawaii are formed from volcanic activity. So we don't have granite. And so the utilization of really hard stone was imperative for our culture to survive and thrive, to do things like carve canoes. So certain areas of our islands, where the lava dried super, super slow, and under certain sets of conditions where, the oxygen and air was able to leak out, created this really, really hard kinds of stones that we call ko'i adzes, and you can only collect them in certain parts of the islands. And these would be used to carve canoes, to make other tools that were essential for survival. So for instance, we know these ads, our kupuna kind of shared them and exchanged them across islands. So it was an incredibly interconnected society, in pre-contact, but all again produced through the resources of our place. Um,
Well, I'm going to let you get into your presentation because I'm fascinated and I want to learn more, and I could ask you questions all day long. But why don't we get to your presentation, because it's probably going to answer 95% of the questions. And also, as we go along, if anybody has questions, if you can put them in the chat to me or publicly in the chat box, and then at the end of the presentation, I will post them, or I will speak them out loud to Dr. Beamer here, and we'll get some answers to your questions.
Great. Okay, Rita, can you see, I think I'm sharing my presentation screen now, but I just want to be sure before I get started. Can you see a
Um,
title slide?
I'm not seeing the title slide. I'm seeing a dark screen with a teeny tiny little, looks like a clock.
Okay. So I have, why is it doing that? Share screen. Let's try now.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, great.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I kind of set some of this context already. Again, this work is really inspired by this ancestral philosophy and knowledge system about Aloha Aina and the ways in which our ancestors, um, you know, thrived in unity with the land and seeing the land as an ancestor, and that's linking that ancestral system with this more contemporary movement to reshape our global economies, from linear economies to circular economies, and um, really inspired by the collaboration with my colleagues at the University of Augsburg, Axel Tuma and Andrea Thorens, are two amazing faculty out there that we've been collaborating on these issues for the last about 6 years. Oh, hold on. Borrowing from our cousins to really the west of Hawaii, is a great Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, and he reminds us, in the Tao Te Ching, if you don't change direction, you may end up where you're heading. And we're celebrating Earth Day, incredible resilience, and I think 50 years of this movement to kind of rethink humanity's relationship to our world, and our resources. Um, and I think at this point, we're all very clear that, we absolutely must change direction. Well, at least most of us are clear. Certain sets of politicians that are in power today aren't as clear. And I think, you know, um, some of the movements that we have today with the youth and others are making it imperative that we must change this direction. For me, you know, as a father, thinking about the impacts of climate change on my place and the resources and the future for our children, absolutely motivates me. Again, I'm an associate professor, but I think most importantly, Kanaka of the Aina and a father. And so I remember, preparing for a talk, and I had the slide with the polar bear. And one of my keiki came up and said, how come people hate the polar bears? Why would they kill them? And again, it really motivates me to have the kind of courage and speak the truth to address these critical issues, so that our keiki will be able to experience the kind of liberties that we have with the world, in keeping our natural systems and species alive, for them. This is an example of a linear economy. What you're looking at is an image of the Alawai Boulevard. It was constructed, this engineered plan turned what used to be these beautiful lo'i systems, wetland taro fields that fed people for generations. And in the 19s, it was a kind of a built as a public works project. Ended up benefiting a small group of people, but they dredged out a whole section of Waikiki, and they created this thing called the Aloha stream channel. And the goal was to divert, this water out of Waikiki, and then they eventually filled in Waikiki to build these hotels. So they filled in these ancestral ponds and field systems and fish ponds to kind of develop Waikiki. Um, but it's a stunning example of the kinds of impacts that our decisions make when we're not thinking about the Aina as an ancestor. Every roughly, probably 2-3 times a month, when there is decent rainfall on Oahu, the Alawai looks like this, and it channels out, this rubbish and waste out on the reefs for the last 100+ years. So you can see, from a global scale to a smaller local scale, we really need to change our behaviors and our decisions and our relationships with the resources around us. When I think about ancestral Hawaiian society, you see this image. This is called a papamu, and so this is a konane board. Konane is this traditional Hawaiian game that we played. It's kind of like, synonymous with Hawaiian checkers in a way. But the difference, the way that you survive and thrive, and the way that you succeed in this particular game, is the goal isn't to consume all of the other pieces on the board. Chess or checkers, and I love those games, especially chess. But the way that you succeed in chess is you consume the other pieces, right, from your opponent. You carve up the board until nothing's left, or maybe you take the king early on. But in any case, it's about consumption. Now, for our ancestors living, in arguably the most isolated place on the planet, at least if you see the ocean as a boundary and a border, we're roughly, 3,000 miles from either coast. When our ancestors developed games and things to, enjoy their time, they set up these games so that we'd be teaching, the youth, young leadership, that the way to win in life is to survive, right? So the way you win in Konane is you play for the last move. And that's an important kind of paradigm shift in a way, right? If we think about that, like our ancestors that lived here for centuries survived because they had this idea of playing for the last move. That success as an individual and as a society was about continuing, right? Was about maintenance, was about not consuming and destroying other things around you, but how do you survive for as long as you can? And I think that's a important paradigm that just comes out of something very simple, like a game, something that you do in your leisure time. But it shows you the ways in which our society, from the bottom up, the top down, was thinking about longevity and existing in perpetuity with the resources that were around us. So this phrase "Aloha Aina" is an ancestral philosophy that thinks about our relationships to the natural world and the land as familial. It's also at times, become this really rallying point politically to change, what Hawaiians, what Aloha Aina have seen as decisions that aren't pono, that aren't in alignment with our value system. And they've, liberated us politically in many instances. And so this was a man, George Jarrett Helm, And this was in the midst of the U.S. bombing of Kaho'olawe. Um, Kaho'olawe is a small island off the coast of Maui. It was used as, basically live fire training and target practice. Um, Roughly after World War II, up until I think the 1980s, almost 1990s. Um, but these young group of Hawaiian youth in the mid to late 1970s organized themselves and they dedicated themselves to stopping the bombing on Ko'olawe. And and this is a quote from George Helm while they were there occupying Ko'olawe to try to stop it from being bombed. This is a quote that comes out of his journal. And he says, "The truth is there is man and there is environment. One does not supersede the other. The breath of man is the breath of Papa, the earth. Man is merely the caretaker of the land that maintains his life and nourishes his soul. Therefore, the Aina is sacred. The church of life is not in a building, it is in the open sky, the surrounding ocean, the beautiful soil. My duty is to protect Mother Earth, who gives me life, and to give thanks with humility, as well as ask for forgiveness for the arrogance and insensitivity of man." Um, I think the truth is, Aloha Aina has been battling climate change and the philosophies of, you know, um, degradation of our environment for generations. And George Helm really was one of these inspirational leaders in bringing back this philosophy. Oops. So what is Aloha Aina? In English, if we're trying to translate it, aloha certainly has multiple meanings. One is kind of love, reciprocity. Um, uh, Aloha can be empathy. Um, Aloha can be forgiveness. And so when we link this aloha and Aina, it's a powerful ancestral kind of phrase. Aina can be translated as land. Um, Literally, Dr. Lilikala Kamelehiva, translates and reminds us that Aina actually, if we literally translate it, it translates to that which feeds, that which produces, and that which feeds us. So there's this real intimate relationship between Aina and people. Um, and in the Hawaiian language, it's trying to bring it out. How do we, we use this word aloha to express these, somewhat different kinds of relationships, at least we think about in English. And I'm sure everyone can have empathy and think about that feeling a grandchild has for a grandparent, a lover to their partner, mother for her daughter, when a child, as a parent or an uncle, an auntie, a grandparent, when a child gets sick, that feeling you have when you're trying to, like, there's nothing that you can really do. They have to just kind of go through their cold or whatever the issue is, and it's that same kind of aloha. Um, and and I try to translate into English to bring out these feelings to express it's that same sort of feeling that from an indigenous standpoint Kanaka would have with the land, with the resources, um, and so we can see very clearly why people like George Helm and others would charge to stop the degradation of our Aina and our environment, or of Mauna Kea, for that matter, because there's this deep feeling of relationship and protection. For me, I've learned a lot of these deep feelings through my relationship with my grandmother, Winona Kapua Ilohia Mānoa Dishu Beamer. I was lucky, the only grandchild. And so in many ways, I just try to continue to make her proud and moving forward in the work that I do. So Aloha Aina then is love, respect, regard, compassion, value, and when we link this together, really Aloha Aina is kind of like this philosophy and a movement towards the union of culture and ecosystem. it was really this guiding philosophy that enabled our ancestors to, develop these unique food systems, production systems that are aligned, with the natural environment and world. Um, if if you're familiar, in Hawaii, we have this really powerful ancestral land division that was a way of bounding resources and providing community access and distributing resources that is called an ahupua'a. Um, and ahupua'a are culturally appropriate, ecologically aligned, and place-specific units with access to diverse resources. These were specific kinds of land management systems that actualized Aloha Aina. Oftentimes, they would tie in, resources that were uplands, and they would extend all the way out, into the ocean themselves. And so, people within a community understood their rights, if you will, and access, and then most importantly, the responsibilities and their relationships to those resources um, within these ahupua'a systems. And again, this is it was the innovation of these systems that allowed us to provide for a population that was roughly as large as the population that we have in Hawaii today. As I mentioned earlier on with one of the questions that we had, population prior, 1777, prior to Cook's arrival in Hawaii, um, rough estimates between probably on the low end 600,000. David Stannard says 800,000 to a million, and there's some models today by Natalie Kurashima that suggest our food system could provide for about 1.3 million people. So an incredibly large population prior to Cook. And it was really, our leadership and society developed these innovations in Hawaii to continue to feed and produce for that population. Um, so Aloha Aina then, being this movement towards a union of culture and ecosystem today, I think this is really important and critical. You know, we have to, as a global society, we have to um, step back and recognize, the ways that our social systems um, are in conflict with the ecosystems that we operate in, and we have to rethink um, that those relationships, and try to bring our social systems and structures and culture more in alignment with the ecosystems that we operate in. And I mean that on a local and a global scale, and I'll get into more of that when we talk about circular economies. So we developed, this is an image of a lo'i system, a wetland taro field that, utilized only a portion of the stream water to produce taro, which is our ancestral crop, in agroecologically, aligned ways. And these are the plants and foods that fed our people for centuries and continue to feed us today. But we developed, Aloha Aina allowed us to develop these food systems so that they would be, integrated and complementary between the natural world and human systems. And so we didn't develop them in isolation. These lo'i eventually, in many places, as the stream would flow out, water would come into the lo'i, create more nutrients, actually provide ladders for fishes to come, and there's even little fishes and species that go between the marine and freshwater areas and migrate. And eventually, this water would be, reach the ocean, where we would enhance sort of the marine estuary. And this is an image of a fish pond. So I think before there was the word aquaculture, our ancestors were farming fish here in Hawaii. And again, so we developed this lo'i system, and then we thought about how it integrated with the marine environment. And constantly in this philosophy of Aloha Aina, we're thinking about those relationships between what we call in Hawaii the mauka and makai, the uplands and the ocean, between people and the natural world, natural environment. And in these fish ponds, we basically try to enhance the marine estuary to grow an abundance of specific kinds of algae, and then to farm herbivorous fish. So this is an image of He'ia fish pond. I have some incredible colleagues and idols, Hitle Cavello, Kili'i Kotubete, Kaneko Schultz, others that are Malkov here that opened up and restored this fish pond. And there's literally thousands of people and youth and children now that get to go and learn and touch the Aina and practice our ancestral relationships because of their incredible work. So when I think of these systems, these lo'i systems and fish ponds, it really shows us that our ancestral economy was circular. You can see even in the connectivity of these two systems, our ancestors were trying to eliminate waste, was an incredible principle. And then when we designed and we modified the environment, we did so in a way that would benefit future generations. This fish pond here in He'ia is estimated to be about 800 years old. So you can, it's obvious then for a fish pond to survive for 800 years, and we're talking about in an incredibly changing marine environment, right? Really shows that our ancestors built and designed it to exist for as long as possible, like in perpetuity. So I think that's an Aloha Aina design principle, is if we are going to modify part of the environment, we have to think long term, and it has to integrate, and enhance the environment as much as possible for the benefit of all society, for feeding people. If there were so many ways that they could have designed fish ponds if the goal was just to feed one, particular chief, but that's not what they did. They really designed long-term, thinking multiple generations out, and how this system was going to work and function. And here's some of the work of Natalie Kurashima that I had mentioned. What's incredibly hopeful for me in Hawaii, I think, is that a lot of our areas for ancestral Hawaiian agriculture aren't developed. And Natalie finds out that, about 71% of the lands used for ancestral agriculture remain undeveloped today. So we have an incredible opportunity in Hawaii to utilize these systems and to build off of the ancestral knowledge and strategies of our kupuna. Another important thing that Natalie highlights is, using only 6% of the lands, ancestrally, we produced, an incredible amount of food, enough food to support about 86% of Hawaii's population today, using only 6% of the land. So it's an incredibly productive system, and we need to, recognize it and build off of it. I think more for food security. And food sovereignty, more importantly, in Hawaii today. So Aloha Aina, sometimes in the archaeological papers and stuff, you talk about ancestral Hawaiian society as having a subsistence economy. And I want to push on that a bit. I think there's some value judgment in that sense. Certainly our economy was built to subsist, and we only took kind of what we needed. There wasn't, again, a capitalist model, where you're driven by profit and, you start to exclude huge chunks of resources for the benefit of a small portion people. That wasn't in place. So there wasn't hoarding and profiteering for sure. But it's a little more, I think, nuanced than just subsisting. We lived in abundance. But I think most importantly, our ancestral economy was more circular. We designed out waste, and we tried to enhance and utilize anytime we modified the environment. We tried to keep that in production for as long as possible to sort of minimize the negative impacts on the environment. So when I talk about our ancestral economy now, I call it a circular economy. And my brilliant colleague, Malia Kuragawa, you know, reminded all of us that the word Aina is right in the middle of sustainability. So perhaps it's no coincidence that in Hawaii we're going and we're thinking about our ancestral systems and Aina when we talk about and categorize sustainability. You know, I think Uncle Walter Riddy has said, you know, before there was sustainability, there was Aloha Aina. There's this philosophy for us to kind of go back to that in many ways is aligned with the sustainability movement today. Um, and so, you know, these are my colleagues, Kili Kotubete here, Axel Tuma from the University of Augsburg in Germany. And I'm gonna kind of now link this Aloha Aina talk with this movement for a circular economy. And I just wanna, you know, mahalo Axel and Kili'i and Andrea and Mawahine Kili'i also for, you know, this collaboration that we have all kind of developed together. You know, we brought Axel to He'ia Fish Pond, and you know, he could kind of see the ancestral systems that were there and explain to him the philosophies of Aloha Aina. And then, you know, Axel brought us to Germany, to Switzerland, and kind of looked at the development of circular economies there. You know, I've done several talks there with his graduate students, and it's just been this really powerful, I think, collaboration, at least for me, intellectually, because Aloha Aina, you know, we really think first about resources and the land, and then circular economies has kind of pushed at least me to think more about products and our relationships to products that are being developed and how we can get those more in line with our practices of Aloha Aina. So I think for us to battle, you know, climate change, you know, we have to be open to learning across cultures and from other places. And to me, this collaboration with Axel folks in Germany at the University of Augsburg has been super informative and hopeful for me. And so this is what's unique is, you know, Kili folks at He'ia and Hi'ile and others, even before they, you know, we didn't know about this movement for a circular economy. I think before, you know, even 2015, when some of the guidelines emerged in the EU, when they were restoring the fish pond, you know, they were, this is an image here of a makaha. So this is sort of like the veins of a fish pond. This is what feeds the fish pond. This is where the water comes in and out, and this is where you can go to collect your fish. This is where you go to let in the baby fish. This is an image where the tide is higher out in the ocean right now. And so what happens is the water rushes into the pond. And so you have this super nutrient rich water that's kind of flowing in. And then when the tide reverses, the water flows out. And so, you know, it will, when the tide's coming in, it's going to collect, you know, the big fish that are in the pond are going to come and get the nutrients that are there, and you can gather your fish. And then when the tide's going out, you know, all the little baby fish that are outside of the pond are trying to swim in. And so it's an incredible, you know, enhanced, you know, environment that utilizes the functions of the natural system to work. And our ancestors developed it in this way. But when they did so, Kili'i and Hile and others, you know, they recycled this, you know, this gate. It was a piece of fiberglass. I can't remember. They got it from somewhere else. It wasn't, I don't manufactured for this. But you know, they didn't want to. They want to waste as minimal as possible. And then over time, you know, the good thing about this gate was, you know, one or two people could come and remove it. It was fairly light, but you know, they started to worry about it degrading, you know, little pieces of fiberglass maybe going into the pond. And so when they redesigned a different gate, you know, they thought hard about it and they wanted to use more natural-based materials. And so to kind of show you the impacts of a circular economy, you know, on this one, right, only one or two people can do it. You don't need that much labor. Perhaps there is some environmental degradation, even though it's a recycled material. But this image, right, this gate, you know, this gate has a name. It's named after Ho'okele, Uncle Neil Hannes, who was kind of a visionary for a lot of this kind of Aina-based restorative work, and particularly the Heia. And, you know, so this gate has a name. It takes, Kaylee told me, I think about, you know, 5, 6, 7 big guys to move this gate. But you can see the way that this gate kind of, you know, this image captures the ways in which a circular economy provides for more than just one service, right? It's not necessarily, you know, just the easiest gate to remove, but yet what are, you know, the cultural impacts of restoring a gate kind of in this fashion? What are the stories and lessons that these people have learned when everybody touches it, right? And kind of going back to, you know, our earlier conversation about our ancestral economy, I think that's really what we have to think about is like economies don't just provide, you know, financial or monetary services, right? There's social services, there's cultural impacts, there's environmental impacts, and we have to kind of collectively see them and think about them together. And that's what's super hopeful, I think, about moving forward with Aloha Aina, and linking it to circular economies. So I'm going to transition real quick. I hope I can do this on my screen. And I want to show you guys a really quick video that kind of categorizes really quick what a circular economy is. And I think this is kind of the easy, let's see, share. Rita, can you let me know if you can see the video up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
okay.
seeing it.
Okay, I'm gonna hit play now, and then I'm gonna let this play through. Then we'll have some time for Q&A. Okay.
Living systems have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food, energy is provided by the sun, things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
Okay, so I think that video kind of in a very quick snapshot highlights some of the goals of a circular economy, and at its level, the goals of a circular economy are basically to decouple environmental degradation with job growth. We all want jobs. We want valuable, livable wages, and we want meaningful work for people. And we want to separate, that work from the degradation of our environment. And circular economy really is this critique on, the economies take since the emergence of capitalism, where there are these linear economies where, it's about, take resources from a particular area in the world, right? How do you do it? Well, you probably want to get the natural resources for the cheapest amount possible. You make them, in a factory somewhere, and you probably will pay labor, the least amount as possible. And then you create your product, and you generate your profit, and that's sort of where it's done, right? And the waste of that materials, whatever happens to it, is sort of someone else's problem. Governments and environmentalists and everyone else has to fix it. And so some of the movement around circular economy is to rethink, kind of the impact and the relationship that producers have with those products over time. And I think in many ways it aligns with Aloha Aina, because we're seeing the world, the environment and natural systems as an ancestor, right? And we're rethink our relationships with it. And I think the hopeful part of a circular economy is, it's a chance for us to design out waste, right? And my colleagues have found, taking waste from deciduous trees and the production of, lumber, and there's elements that you can pull from the bark that you can use to replace some petroleum-based products. And so it's kind of like tweaking and rethinking the ways that we make our products and then how we generate our systems. If I went into my yard, I could pull out a tea leaf right now, and a tea leaf for our ancestors, is provided for so many things. I mean, it could be clothing, a coat. It could be sandals. It could be medicine for a fever. It could be wrapping for food and laulau. But no matter what you use that tea leaf for, when it was done, it turned back into the soil. And so, yeah, linking Aloha Aina and circular economies gives us this chance to bring ancestral knowledge together, and to inform, our new approaches to the economies of the future that can help mitigate climate change and save our planet. So mahalo for the time. And if there's any questions, we can kind of talk story.
Thank you. That presentation was, I love the video. It was entertaining and just, I got it right away.
Yeah.
Cartoons are great.
Cartoons
Great
for
learning
adults.
mechanism.
Yes.
But we have some great questions here. This one is from Bridget. And how can we move towards a circular economy when capitalism has a stronghold in our social structures?
Sure. So I'm not sure where Bridget is writing from, and she's actually really spot on. I think certain countries will have, there'll be more political resistance for transitioning into a circular economy. Some of what I've learned and where I generate hope is places like Germany, and Denmark. Other countries in the EU are embracing circular economy principles. There's actually a whole set of guidelines, EU guidelines around the circular economy that was published, I believe, in 2015. So the EU as a whole is trying to incentivize this movement to a circular economy. It's less well known in the United States, but even some U.S. companies, Apple, for instance, in the last couple years now has a program you can return your iPhones, and they're trying to pull the resources, extract resources to build new iPhones from the old iPhones. So essentially eliminating out some of the waste. But additionally, I think parts of the circular economy movements are trying to incentivize the movement to a circular economy that there is, in some instances, profits to be made for companies to transition themselves. But there is I think you're spot on, Bridget. There is a tension, right? A connection between the way that the linear economy has functioned alongside of capitalism and the way that that's degraded our environment. And, it might be linking some of the social resistance strategies to climate change with the movement for circular economies might enable us to better put together policies that will help our local communities to become more circular. I also think we have somewhat of a it's an opportunity. It's a crazy situation that we're in. Everyone kind of on lockdown in the midst of this coronavirus, but there are serious conversations about how to reopen local economies and rethink them. At least if you're writing from here in Hawaii, Bridget, there's a lot of conversations about the almost exclusive reliance on tourism to power Hawaii's economy and what that looks like when we reopen. And so I'm a part of several policy groups where we're trying to think about how we reopen and also move towards a circular economy in the same process.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I have another question from Koa on social media. Are the Hawaiian fish ponds owned by the state or private parties?
That's it depends. It depends. So I'm trying not to. I teach a whole seminar class around land tenure and the shifts, from the prior to the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom into this sort of situation that we're in right now in Hawaii, and how that's changed both individual and collective ownership and rights and responsibilities. So that's a very good and complicated question. The short answer is if your fish pond was registered in the 19s, they were people were able to preserve them. And a lot of times there's these things called konhiki awards. So the fish pond that I showed you, Paipai'oheia, for instance, that fish pond is, and I'll put owned in kind of like weird quotations because I'm not super comfortable with like saying one group or thing owns it per se, but it's owned by, you know, Kamehameha schools, because Kamehameha schools at the time of the Mahele got the entire ahupua of Heia, and that fish pond was included in it. And then they, you know, they lease it out to Paipai'oheia, who engages all of the community to utilize it. So fish ponds are these like sort of hybrid areas of ownership that mix Hawaiian law with you know, at least after the Ortho, with American law. But there are some state-owned fish ponds depending on what ahupua it's in, like Kahana, for instance. Kahana fish pond. Kahana is now owned by the state, and so that would be an area that the state kind of controls, that, you know, ownership of that fish pond. Good question.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. The next question is from Frank. In pre-contact Hawaii, how was the circular economy administered? Was there some form of government management or regulation?
Yeah, awesome question. So, when you know, Ancestral Hawaiian Society wasn't static, so I'm not saying it was always one way. You know, part of that innovation and the development of fish ponds and taro fields were, you know, unique sets of innovations that happened, you know, on the ground at the time, and they reshaped some of the governance structures of society. I will say, when it worked well, you know, there was a balance of, you know, top down and bottom up, and that's really when the system worked well. And so let me give you an example. So in ancestral Hawaii, right? Imagine, you know, let's just say 800,000 people entirely reliant on the resources that they interact with, you know, at least on a daily or, you know, a monthly basis, right? Now, there was levels of governance from the top, the chiefs, you know, they set up these systems and structures so that people had access to certain ahupua'a and resources in what they lived in. And, you know, they set guidelines for people to understand what they could gather, when they could gather, when gathering had to stop. But they also empowered the community to inform the management of those resources. And so, you know, there's no way that a top down, you know, a chief in some area is going to know when the veil, which is this beautiful red fish that is one of my favorites, is spawning in every place in Hawaii, because they actually spawn at slightly different times. But the communities on the ground that are interacting with those resources would know, right? And so the communities were empowered to set times when you would gather and when you wouldn't gather through, you know, like an on-site sort of manager. It's actually an official position, was called a konohiki. But what I want to get at is, if, you know, and there were other times, I think, you know, bad sets of chiefs in particular areas, and the chief had to be removed, you know. So it's not that it was always perfect, but when it worked, again, it's this balance of the right amount of top down and the right amount of bottom up. And I think in a lot of resource management today, what we can learn is there's a little too much top down, and communities need to be more empowered to make decisions about the resources that they interact with on an everyday basis, and to have some level of, you know, of authority with those resources. But really good question.
Okay, the last question is from an unnamed viewer. And this viewer would like to know what you mean. You said something about circular economy is our ancestors. Can you explain that?
Maybe I said circular economy. Our ancestral economy was a circular economy. That's sort of at least what I meant. I'm not sure. I might have come out weird or something at some point in the talk, but the point that I was trying to make is that ancestral Hawaiian economy prior to contact was a circular economy, and the philosophy of Aloha Aina, which essentially laid out what our economy would look like, that philosophy was about seeing the land and resources as an ancestor, right? That there's this familial relationship when you look into our genealogies, the Kumulipo, the Kumuhonua, these other genealogies. Literally, it lays out lands and species being born before humans, and so our ancestors saw this, the duty then of Kanaka, right, is to care for these elder siblings, right, and to treat them as such, like you would in a family, relationship between a grandchild and a grandparent. Yeah, so that's sort of what I meant. I'm sorry if it might have come out strange at some point.
No problem, no problem. Well, that's it for all of the questions. And I want to say mahalo to you for filling the last hour and 10 minutes maybe, with so much information and knowledge, wisdom, and especially your beautiful spirit. We really appreciate you lending your voice to the Pacific on Earth Day Live 2020. And I want to remind everybody we've got more programming coming up at 11 o'clock. We have Dr. John Osorio, his Ohana, sharing wisdom and music. And we also have a call to action this morning. Today is Call to Action Day. And we want everybody to call Liberty Mutual, the CEO of Liberty Mutual, and ask him to please divest from fossil fuels. He has not done so, and Liberty Mutual insures people and property. Yet they are invested in fossil fuel companies. So there's a real dichotomy there, and we don't understand. And this, profit before people has got to stop. And when they invest in fossil fuel companies, they're putting profit before people. So if you go onto the map on Earth Day Live 2020, and you will see little pins, special little pins, call to action. It'll tell you exactly what to do and the phone number. And after this session, I will put the phone number up on the screen. If you want to stick around a little bit, I'll try to get that up. And if not, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Beamer, for your time today and your aloha.
Mahalo. Thank you, Rita. Aloha nui, everybody. We hope.
Bye-bye.